Well, it's Bill Brandmeier. We're back, and we're joined by the Mayor Q, the 55th mayor of Kansas City, Missouri. So excited to have him join us for Ready to Play Week. He's a former athlete, used academics and athletics to drive him into success in life, and he's one of the people that we look up to here at Sharewaves. Thank you for joining us, Mayor Q. Really appreciate you being on Ready to Play Week.
Hey, happy to be with you. Always happy to talk sports with people who are working with our kids. So looking forward to the chat.
Well, that's great. This conversation, I want to steer towards the things that you have done in order to lead us through crisis. As a leader, you are, you walked into this job in 2019 with a lot of hope and a lot of vision, a lot of energy. You were going to tackle some of the major concerns in our society. And 6 months into your tenure, you get knocked over the head with COVID. Tell me what the experience was like when you first kind of learned about this happening to our city, what this was going to mean, and the safety concerns, and then how you navigated through that. Go back.
First of all, it was incredibly surreal. So as a sports guy, and any of you who know Kansas City, the springtime, particularly once you get to March, is such an amazing time in Kansas City. Big 12 tournament. We're going to have some great March Madness games. NAIA tournament. It is when Kansas City really opens up for the first time of the year. And to lose that, to cancel it, to scuttle all of it was something that no mayor ever wants to do. And I will tell you, by the way, who I was the least popular with for about a week or two were all of the brides-to-be of Kansas City. Because when we made an order that canceled all the weddings, you shut down school and people will be all right. But some bride who's 2 weeks from getting married, and she's like, I went through all of this stuff. It was tough. But, I will say this. We didn't have time to actually equivocate and go through all that. You just had to make decisions. We made a pretty early decision in connection with issuing a stay-at-home order. We did that about the same time that New York City did, and they, even by then, had tons of cases, tons of deaths, and we said we didn't want that here. And it wasn't just because I was looking at a place like New York, I was looking at New Orleans, a metro area that's a little smaller than ours, that had thousands of infections at a time that we didn't at all, and has a lot more deaths as a result of it. So I think we acted right. I tried to always let people know where I was coming from. We tried to inform them, give them the rationale. Even though I know there'll be disagreement, I figured, people know where you're coming from. If they know the why, then by and large, they'll work with you.
Well, early on, I jumped on something. I read an article in the Kansas City Star, and I called Mark Bedell, Dr. Bedell from Kansas City Public Schools, and I was worried about the last 2 weeks of summer. I realized that school was going to go back in session about 2 weeks later than last year, and there was going to be a lot of different gaps in service and care for kids. And I was afraid that the last 2 weeks of summer was something that we needed to think about. What are we going to do with our kids for 2 weeks? Lo and behold, a week later, he shuts down the school system, and we're dealing with instead of a 2-week problem, about a 15-week problem. And, our kids out of school, our kids not in recess, our kids not on the fields playing, not active, not engaged. And I became, I'm running an organization that is trying to keep kids engaged with sports. I got afraid. And so I've been concerned about it. I've been thinking about it. I know you have a tremendous amount of things you're worried about. And childcare is one of those things that rises to the top. But, where do you place it in terms of small businesses and PPE equipment and, hunger, scarcity of basic needs? So it does kind of fall down the list in terms of what we care about. But then when we turn to summer and we realize that the upper room isn't offering programming, that Operation Breakthrough is not operating at capacity, Boys and Girls Clubs suffering, all of these organizations, Della Lamb, you could just go down the link, all of these down the list, all of these organizations are not at full capacity. Is there a concern on your part for childcare, and do you feel like there's something that we can do to make a difference?
Yes, there absolutely, there absolutely is a concern. I mean, look, when we closed schools, that was one of my biggest concerns. And you know this because you work with so many of these organizations. Um, there are some kids who will have two parents at home and will stay engaged and will eat well and, maybe are doing all right, even though their world's even changed a bit. And there are others, and my upbringing was part of this. And my mom, God love her, worked her tail off. Right? I didn't know, so I've never met my father, and so it was me getting yelled at all summer by my track coach. Right? I mean, every summer of my life was AAU track and field,
Right.
and it helped me in many ways become the person I am today. Not a track athlete, but a mayor. And we know, and you know, that those are the foundational stories of so many kids in our community who find a life path, who learn so many important principles, frankly, who get exposed to men in the community
Right.
because, there are a lot of them without dads at home. And so, yeah, I mean, I've got grave concerns about what this has meant for us. Actually, I talked to Dr. Bedell recently about that too. And I know Kansas City schools, Kansas City, Kansas public schools, I've talked to some folks there. There are a lot of people that have that issue. So that's one. So then the question of, well, what do we do? That's why in connection with our orders and our reopening, and that's why we're making people wear these masks, because I want to make sure that things stay open. I want to let it be so we can have kids' youth activities, through the summer. Because the reality is this, for a lot of young people, if we don't have structured activities they can get back to, they're still going to catch up with other kids, right? They're just going to be, walking around the parks, doing other things, doing things that, aren't as productive for us. And
Right.
so that's what we're working on, making sure we can open back up.
I talked to Classy Alkaline about it, focused on violence and the idea that we have a bunch of kids in their teens with, not a lot of things to engage with is a recipe for maybe some negative things to happen. And I think the more we can do to help provide safe spaces for kids, the better. And Ready to Play Week is trying to do that through our relationship with Will Shields and the Will to Succeed Foundation. We're trying to figure out if we can provide a safe space for kids this summer. And I know that you have violence and you have protests and you have really serious things in terms of how you're managing through the crisis that rise to a level that necessitate your attention. Do you feel like there's a role for sports to connect with kids and get them off of the streets and into something positive that is we could tell people that, hey, this is a really big deal?
Yeah, absolutely. What is the only thing in our community? Let's talk about race and protests right now. What's the only thing in our community that brings a kid from Central High School in KC-Mo together with a kid from Blue Valley West?
Yeah.
Right? It's a sporting event. It's a game. It's basketball, it's track, it's football, it's something like that. And so, we need that back, particularly, when you're talking about, some of our young men. And don't get me wrong, I care about our young ladies. We need lots of opportunities for them, but we all read the newspaper. A lot of our victims, a lot of our assailants are men between the ages of, God bless them, 16 and 24.
Right.
And so, trying to build a pipeline so they know there's something different is something that I care a ton about. And so, sports is that. And I'll also say this, as we are kind of coming back and reopening society, probably, I think it's more likely that we have a baseball game that's a bunch of high schoolers playing or younger people happening before we have a big concert or show. Yep. And that's not to say I don't respect the symphony or all of these others, but, sports is going to kind of be, I think, how reopening happens in this country, mainly from the youth and amateur level. And so, yeah, we've got real work to do to make sure that we can both maintain it, we can give these young people activities, frankly, that we can support it. That's why I love what you're doing, because God, it makes such a difference. And I will just say this briefly. Every school I go to, every inner city school, almost every school I go to, but every inner city school, you ask the kids what they want to do one day. And, you know, a lot of them will either say their dad's job, cop, firefighter, or they'll say be a Chiefs player or whatever else. And what I take from that, as we all know, man, they're not all going to become Chiefs players. But it's kind of like, all right, well, how can I keep you in school and engaged so you can get to the point where you can do something, you know, in the world with it? If playing sports is something that keeps you motivated in high school, that's the good that we're doing. And that's some of the stuff that I want to make sure we don't forget about in this moment.
Well, I know you spent some time in Cape Town and in South
Yeah.
Africa, and Nelson Mandela. You know, he was famous for saying sports has the power to change the world, and I believe it does, and that's what Shareways is founded on. One last thing I just want to cover with you, and then we can be done. And I really appreciate your time. Mayor Quinton Lucas joining us here for Ready to Play Week. And I know you wake up every day ready to play. So I no doubt that this theme is part of who you are. But access is privilege. We want to create access for kids. We feel like that there's a haves and the have-nots in youth sports. Just speak a little bit to what COVID has done in terms of showcasing or shining a light on the haves and the have-nots, and how access is privilege, and how that plays into the racial injustice and you know the problems that we're facing as a culture.
Yeah, you know, a few different ways that I think we've seen it. One relating to how we school, the other relating to how we sport, I guess. For schooling, you know, we did the stay-at-home thing. It was so interesting. Whenever I visited with a classroom of mainly Black or Latino students, you had a lot more who were on a cell phone maybe with it as compared to, you know, suburban kids who had a setup kind of like ours and all of that. A lot more were dropping in and out, and some weren't around. I you know, shared some messages with a principal in a Kansas City Public Schools high school who was talking about how a lot of his students, believe it or not, went to work, right? A lot of his 16, 17-year-olds just started working in restaurants and that sort of thing. I mean, that's, they didn't get, you talk about access as privilege. Yeah, they didn't get to kick the soccer ball around or do any other type of stuff. So that's one. And as it relates to sports more directly, when you look at conditioning and how we eat and all that sort of stuff, you know, there are a lot of, you know, that's working out. That's keeping people healthy. That's keeping people engaged. And we've lost some of that. And so I hope as we come back, there are people that are putting more training online. I know Ready to Play Weeks allows us to do things like that, or letting people get the mentorship that they may be missing. I mean, that's the sort of stuff that we need to make sure our young people can pick back up in some way from where they left off before.
Well, we're brand new, but we're going to keep pushing towards trying to find solutions. I'm a solution-based guy. I like trying to make things happen. I'm very collaborative, and I would invite any kind of opportunity to work with you and your team on trying to create better access for different types of sports in low-income situations. We want to try to do that work. This has been a great conversation. I really, really appreciate your time. I respect all the things that you have to worry about and do, and for you to give us a little bit of your expertise and advice has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Hey, you know, maybe like you, I still feel like I'm just a high school athlete, right? I'm not half as fast as I used to be, though. So sometimes when we talk about it, it's just us living those great memories, right?
Definitely.
Well, take care.
Yeah, you too.